Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Bavarian and I asked you and you responded, should we do the Confederated Canada AAR, so the after action report that was done on the Discord by developer Daniel Tollman, and you overwhelmingly said yes. This first episode basically here, it was done on my birthday on the 6th of January, so that was quite nice, what a birthday present, and I thought about it, I said to myself, hey listen, I don't want to just read it out. I would like to debate, I would like to discuss some things, that is why we're here. We want to look at the mechanics interlocking, working together, and then having a result. And I actually think that this is an incredibly worthwhile after-action report because he is very, very dedicated to creating societal upheaval, which is important because it makes it so that we can see how the mechanics fit together, whether it's balanced or not. Completely just throw that out the window. I want to make that clear here. It does not matter because this is pre-release. What matters is whether these systems actually work together or whether they can be ignored. That is the important stuff, right? And there's a lot of that going on here. This is a societal upheaval and it's an economic upheaval. You're going to see that. Now let's just take a look at what the goals. I will, actually, before we do that, I will warn you, it will probably be like 2 or 3 more episodes. I gotta tell you, I cut out some Daniel Tollman statements, because I was like, we don't necessarily need that, and yet I ended up with a huge, a huge first episode right here, so I expect the same for the other episodes. So be warned, but let's just jump into it. Confederated Canada starts here. Goals for this playthrough. Unite Canada. That is, of course, the obvious political goal, and we're going to see the unification mechanics, by which I mean we're not going to see them at all, but we can start guessing once we get to that. Have a railway connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. That's a nice vanity project. I love it. Pass the multiculturalism law. This is cool. This is so cool because we have a society that isn't multicultural at all. We have discriminated Native Americans. We have not fully accepted but not discriminated against Franco-Canadians. And then we have, of course, the Anglo-Canadians that are the standard main population. And we're going to have the multicultural law, which makes it so that many people will migrate because there are many laws, but many people that are losing, privileges that they previously held over other groups of people will be very angry. This is important. This is very big because in the paper AAR, we didn't really get a chance to see the impact of a societal shift. Here we do. This is very important to see the actual gameplay mechanics. Pass public health insurance and have maximum investment in healthcare. Very excited to see that as well. And then remain a British subject. So this is a breeding ground of societal and economic changes in a bit of a vacuum, in the sense that he will just remain within the British market as a British puppet, making it so that he can just have a good time, right? It should be fairly easy for him. I will tell you right now, even just in this episode 1, there are a lot of things that we can discuss, so let's jump into it without wasting any more time. We're playing as Upper Canada, which would historically become the province of Ontario. We only have a single state, and it's not at all developed. Just a few farms, plus a coal mine and a sulfur mine. Our tech is pretty damn good though, especially our society tech. Often, I'd be tempted to go straight for railways, but the natural infrastructure of the regions, I believe these are the Great Lakes, right, means we won't need that for quite a long time. Instead, I'll beeline nationalism, so something to consider here is that since it is his capital, and he only has one state, that state gets an infrastructure bonus also, making it so that railways, unless he expands and unless he needs to connect to other provinces, should be fairly easy to ignore, because he already has good infrastructure. I believe the Great Lakes also give some infrastructure as well. I have kicked out the ruling landowners immediately, who have most of the country's political clout. I'm sure this will be fine. They are replaced with the only slightly relevant industrialists and intelligentsia. I'm going to do my best to industrialize and liberalize the country. Right now, the law that serves my interests the most without risking a revolution is poor laws. This will provide a small amount of welfare while empowering the industrialists. Very good. So he made a huge change here already. We're going to see how long passing this law takes. Remember, in the papal AAR, because this government didn't have legitimacy, that is because they didn't have enough clout, but also in an autocracy, you require your ruler's IG, so in whichever IG your ruler is, you need that IG in government as well. I don't think this is the case here. I think he's a bit more liberalized to begin with. Let's move on. We start out with religious schools. Eventually, I want to switch them to public schools, but for now, this is fine. I'm immediately going to start expanding them. This will empower the devout, which I'm not a big fan of, but they are also not likely to oppose me either. Right, so the devout, he hopes, will just go away. Then we have the landowners, who he will actively try to reduce the power of by taking away their power base. And that is done on an economic level. And I love that. that is done on the economic level because he is moving away people that are in the landowner faction, or rather that are generating income for the landowner, thereby giving them clout. He is moving them away because he's changing his economy. We're going to see that in a bit. Onto the national budget, I'm very pleased to discover that we have payroll tax, an actual real tax law that doesn't rely on having millions of peasants. So that was the papal issue, right? Most of the money goes towards maintaining the military. I'm not interested in war this session, so I'm just going to disband everything. Let's be real, if he were under attack, the British would just help him. This will drastically reduce both our expenses and the power of the armed forces. We are part of the British market and we intend to remain there. This means we'll need to pay attention to market trends that we largely do not control and react to them. One thing I immediately notice is the high price of artillery. We may not need our own military force, but we can certainly sell arms to our overlords. This is good stuff. It's really interesting to know. So let's talk about this. He doesn't have a market capital in his own location. He needs to rely not just on his own infrastructure, but also on the fact that Britain actually can maintain the connection between Canada, so, the naval supply network, and the market capital in London. On the other hand, he also needs to rely on the fact that Britain, I don't know, hey, if he goes into one economic direction, Britain could be adding a different location into the British market that also produces the same thing, completely ruining his economy. That is such a cool outlook. Again, I just want to reframe this. Let's take a look at Victoria 2, right? Yes, if you don't have something in your market, it will be very expensive. The market buy hierarchy is such a mess as well because, the overlord, of course, gets first access to market, so the overlord's actual location gets the goods of the other market locations. But if you have something that you can't access at all in your market in Victoria 2, you would basically just get it on the world market. This sort of normalizes something. What I mean is, let's say you have a market in Victoria 2 that has no coal whatsoever. You still get coal. It's at a higher price, but you still get coal because it comes from the world market. Meaning, if you're part of that market, you can exploit coal only so much because eventually the price that you can exploit it for would reach the world market level. In Victoria 3, that will be different. And I love that. I just want to point that out because it's so important. In Victoria 3, if nobody else produces coal in this market and there's no way of importing coal, you have no coal. You can get the highest possible price if you are the only producer. It's gorgeous. Seriously, that's this new mechanic, because of the lack of a world market, is gorgeous, and you're going to see that in action here, as he is a small part, but a vital part of the British market. One thing I immediately noticed, right, is artillery. So I'm starting out by creating an arms industry, given that we are one province minor, or well, one state minor. Another thing to keep in mind is that every building in the country has a significant impact on the balance of power. A single building that employs capitalists will shift wealth and power to the industrialists with far more impact than it would in a larger country, for example. Makes a lot of sense, right? If I'm a tiny country, I have one industry, that industry all of a sudden dominates everything I am. That's not just true back then, but that's also true today. That's just the way it is. If you have a monoculture, for example, then you will be looking at a very influential one-dimensional, well, two-dimensional power faction. My now completed arms industries employ engineers, machinists, laborers, and shopkeepers. These arms industries are owned by the merchant guilds, which increases the employment of shopkeepers in the building. So we are, without a doubt, going towards intelligentsia and industrialists. When we have the rifling technology, we'll be able to switch to private ownership, which will employ more capitalists. Which IGs do your shopkeepers tend to support? Petite bourgeoisie. Not as bad as landowners, but not as great as the other ones, who I have no use for and may become very dangerous in the future. They are reactionary conservatives, so they are basically what you might expect the landowners to be as well, but maybe without like the devout drift, right? But the petite bourgeoisie here is interesting, of course, because if we want to translate this into real-world terms, the petite bourgeoisie would basically be the very influential Anglo-Canadians that are not interested in sharing their wealth or their power with anybody. So getting rid of the shopkeepers, indeed a very important move so that he can actually get industrialists. So, now that my arms industries are fully employed, I can see that they are making a tidy profit and enriching the people who work there. The price of iron is causing input costs to be high, but thankfully the price of cannons is even higher, resulting in a profitable business. How are the landed gentry taking getting booted out of government? They were not thrilled, but they were not going to try to overthrow the government, so there was a risk assessment here that he made. He could kick them out, and that is fine. I'm also seeing that coal has become expensive in the British market, so that's my new next industry to expand. Boom. He is following the market trend. He has no access to actually doing something with the market, and he sees a niche. Let's see how he exploits it. So, what's the plan for Confederation? If all goes to plan, I won't even need to start any plays, so we know now that unification, which is Italy, Germany, Canada, who else could it be? It could be Sokoto, so it could be maybe some African nations. Ethiopia, I believe, is a candidate, right? Maybe Arabia, maybe the Indian princes, maybe Vietnam, maybe, Indochina. And I think that might be it, where we are looking at mechanics that could be a generalized unification mechanic. I want to point this out because many people that don't follow the games very actively, many people that don't talk to the devs, by the way, join the Discords. In CK3 and Victoria 3, the devs are very active, but if you don't follow it, then you may not realize this, but Paradox has shifted their gameplay philosophy towards essentially saying, hey, look at what we have right here. We are basically having a game that has mechanics that should be true for the entire map. They want to move away from saying we are developing unification mechanics that are very specific to Italy, to Germany, and so on. They want a generalized idea so that they can then apply this template everywhere where it needs to be. I think personally that is good because it makes it so that generally every region that has a unification potential is richer in how it can proceed. Maybe it works even for Scandinavia, thinking about it, right? Because Scandinavia, of course, can form Scandinavia. But either way. And this is, in my opinion, likely to be one of those mechanics. I don't think there will be a German-Italian unification specific stuff, I think this will be a general one that will be unlocked for unification-prone areas once you have nationalism. You will see that here in a second as well. Very interesting. He is very tight-lipped when it comes to how it actually works, but that is just everything that we can see here already. Because I'm using atmospheric engines in my coal mines, I'm able to activate the private ownership production method, which employs capitalists, because you need more capital, of course, to finance these engines. I'm trying to shift wealth and power away from the landowners any way I can. So expanding my coal mines will not only increase my GDP and standard of living, it will shift my internal politics in the direction I want. Listen, this is truly gorgeous. The fact that I, depending on what industry I take, depending on how I expand, on what I expand, on what I see in the market, can change my society, and that I have to do this to actually change my society, is really good. Depending on how the actual information layer works, so whether we can easily tell into which direction something will shift, we will see how well it works in practice, how much I need to know in the background, how much I need to see the spreadsheets, but I love this. You can't do it in this dedicated a fashion in Victoria 2. Obviously, how rich pops are, what sort of influence they have also matters for this, but factories are factories are factories because they are craftsmen and they are clerks. That is how it works, Obviously, you have capitalists that get fed on them, but the actual factories are always the same. Here it's different. You can have a very sophisticated factory that needs engineers. You can have a very non-sophisticated factory, or a mine, that employs mostly laborers, and you will have a completely different political setup. This is very important because we won't just get laborers from this, and of course capitalists, no. We will also be getting rich laborers. Because, hey, a poor laborer might be politically inactive, they might become trade unionists, or they could become, I don't know, what about industrialists? What about petite bourgeoisie? If they have enough money, if they have enough education, they might go there. And that is interesting. You cannot do this in any other game. It's impossible. Straight up. Let's take a look at this. So, expanding my coal mines will not only increase, right, it will also push us into the right direction. Relations with Britain, by the way, are very poor for historical reasons. I believe there was a rebellion in Canada in 1836, right, against the British. We're working on improving them. We're also improving relations with our fellow Canadians, so the other Canadian vassals. What is the current standard of living, by the way? Very average. We're using the slowest construction method, so building things takes a while, but it's also cheap. We basically break even in budgetary terms while we're constructing in Ontario. What are the accepted cultures of Upper Canada? Only Anglo-Canadian. With our racial segregation laws, we will accept any culture with European heritage, so a migration target without a doubt. This unfortunately means that we discriminate against the Native American peoples whose land we live on. We'll try to address that later on. Again, this is all about shifting your society into a much more open society. Can we use the sulfur to make any more valuable goods at the moment? Not right now, but in the future, I think we're likely to build some chemical plants. Coal continues to be expensive, so for now, I'm just going to continue expanding my coal mines. This right here is a monoculture. Usually that term is used for agriculture, of course, when you only have one. For example, I believe Kenya did a lot with tulips, that sort of stuff. But in this case, you have a single industry, and should the price for this fall, you will have revolutions. And I really, really need the game should this happen, and I believe the situation becomes much, much worse from late on, but I really need the game to just say, yep, okay, you're getting screwed over, everybody will be radical, and you will have a revolution. I need the negative impact of an industry, sinking, of, for example, your coal miners in the Rhine-Ruhr area, in, the Toronto area here. I need them to really feel the negative impacts just as they felt and feel the positive impacts. I don't want Victoria to smoothed out sort of decision-making process, right? That is something that I would love if we, for the first time ever, had an understandable, a stoppable, but also an impactful downfall mechanic. That's what I'm looking forward to, at least. Let's take a look at how it plays out here in this dev diary. Both in this AAR. Both the industrialists and intelligentsia are very happy with our government. The industrialists are causing capitalists to increase their contribution to the investment pool. That is one of the perks that you get if they are happy. Very good. And with my mercantilism law, I can use the investment pool on almost anything that will generate profit. Huge, huge fan. Of course, having the law actually influence what you can use the investment pool for, that is sort of the stand-in. Instead of having capitalists actually do it themselves, this is the stand-in, they just give you general guidance. Oh, and the intelligentsia are increasing my migration attraction, which is very important if you want a huge population boom, which we want, because we are multicultural, right? I have plenty of authority that I'm doing nothing with. I'll enact a decree to increase the throughput of my mines. Remember, authority makes you pass laws faster, that's it, yeah. Who wants to migrate into Canada at the moment? Mostly other Canadians. I mean, it's right there, right? So it makes a lot of sense to just cross the border. Literacy is over 50% and rising. We're continuing to invest in religious schools. Remember, the Vatican, so the Papal States playthrough had, I think, like 25% initially of literacy, so this is a huge difference already for tech speed. Due to my excessive micromanagement of the coal industry, our coal mines are the most productive in the world in terms of productivity per employee, though certainly not in terms of raw output. Should we start attracting perhaps the Irish? Well, we've already attracted about 600 Irish to Ontario. It's October 1837, so we are about 1.5 years in. The budget is looking really good now. I'm going to try increasing construction speed. Our GDP is a little higher than Lower Canada's. I need to be the largest Canadian economy for the reasons of unification. So apparently, wherever there is the economic center, that has an influence on the question of unification. Maybe you can press a button, maybe they will press a button, right, saying, I want to be annexed right now. Who knows? It is nonetheless very interesting that is something that is related to this mechanic. Big, big fan. How much has GDP increased since the start of the game? It's almost doubled in just about a year. This is because I started with essentially no productive industry. It's very easy to go from 1 to 4, right? That is a huge increase, but it doesn't really mean that much. And now I have insanely productive coal mines. This seems like a big increase, but in the same way that double 1 is 2. There are some laws that you want to enact in the short... are there some laws that you want to enact in the short term? Poor laws, right. Increase standard of living very slightly, empowers the industrialists. I'm actually going to spend all of my authority. So he is trying to pass that law, but, then he goes on... Oh, actually, no, he was doing a decree, right? Yeah, I believe so. Now, wait, here we have it. Increase the throughput of my mines, right? Yeah, very strong. But now he's going to spend all of my authority. This means I get no bonus to law enactment time at all. I'll be spending it on a decree that increases my migration attraction even further. This is important because my population is low, and that should be a hard blocker on economic expansion. Right, that makes a lot of sense. For now, however, our low population means low bureaucracy cost for institutions. Our religious schools are so cheap to maintain that I don't even need a single government administration building. That is very interesting. Now here's the next question by Captain Nemo. It's a bit cut off, but basically he is asking, hey, now that you kicked out the landowners and such, are they angry? Will they rebel? Well, actually, I put the radicals in power, right? Everybody that was unhappy with the country is now in power. That's the intelligentsia and the industrials. So, hey, yeah, there's not going to be any revolution. GDP has reached $1 million. What's your population currently? 400k people live in Upper Canada. You know what? Let me actually go back here to the radical point. It really begs, there's the question here. There have to be mandates. I'm thinking this through. The journal system isn't out yet, so we don't know how it works. But think about it. If every time I have radicals, I could put the radicals into power, I would never have a revolution. But if I put radicals into power and they have a mandate that, for example, says we need to pass a law to get rid of the king, I would either do that or they might voluntarily leave the government, leading to a government crisis and to a revolution. So the way I see it, in my opinion, unless you want to be able to just always put the radicals in power and never worry about a revolution, you need to make it so that putting them into power will demand something off of you. So my suspicion here, and this is completely out of thin air, well, everything that we know so far, which isn't really thin air, but my suspicion here is that putting any faction into government will give you a journal entry of you needing to do something. And if you fail to do something, they might leave government. I think that could be a valid idea. I think that could make it so that you need to really look at your IGs and whether you can afford whatever they demand. But is that confirmed? No, absolutely not. How much are you limited by resource levels in Ontario? We are very limited. Our coal mines are doing a lot of work for us, but not. We only have a capacity for 11 in the state. Ontario has the following natural resources, all about the same capacity. Coal, sulfur, wood. It only has 26 arable land, which I can use for livestock, wheat farms, and tobacco. And later tech increase the potential number of mines available, so the resource slots, right? No, but it can help me get a lot more about of the mines I have. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. You don't get more coal, you actually just can use it better or can, you know, get more out of it. Is 11 considered to be low, right? The 11 slots for coal mines. Prussia's part of the Rhineland has 23, so yeah, it's pretty low. The US-Mexican war has kicked off. USA want Utah and New Mexico. We just got railway tech through tech spread. Cool, but not really useful. Industrialists now have 22% of the total political clout. Just to talk about the tech spread again, I don't want to do it for too long because we've talked about it on the channel previously, but I maintain that random tech spread is the most boring mechanic that we could have gotten here. We have it in CK3, and while I appreciate the thought that goes into it, where you say you have random tech spread and you will slowly get something through exposure, it's such a non-factor. It just really doesn't matter. Like, yes, you will catch up, but you didn't research these for a reason. You chose to not research them for a good reason. I think they should give you some influence over it via tech trade deals, via just trade deals, which give you natural exposure, via attachés, that sort of stuff. I find this to be a very inadequate solution. But it's the sort of release solution that you can anticipate, right? This is a working system. Is it very exciting? No, not really. Do you think there's a possibility of conflict with the US in the future? I'm hoping we can avoid it. Is Texas part of the US? No, Texas managed to win its independence war and has not joined the US. We're now up to 2k Irishmen in Ontario for anyone who cares, so from 600 to 2k. That's enough to staff 2 coal mines. I believe in the past 2 coal mines would have been 10,000 people? Maybe they changed the numbers. I mean, the numbers are always subject to change, so let's not get hung up on it. Are landowners still the most influential? Rural folk are actually the most influential due to our fairly liberal voting franchise and the number of people still not employed in industry. So he still wants to shift people over into the coal mines so that they can get fairly rich from the high wages and so that they don't work anywhere else and get ideas that aren't industrialist or intelligentsia and so on. Do any cultures present in Ontario have obsessions with any goods? We have a few English pops who love tea. I love it. We're now making a profit using our best available construction method. Ontario is at this point basically just a coal mine. And it's paying off. He saw the weak spot in the market and it's paying off. What has to be said here, and we're gonna see that as we go, even if you find a weak spot, the rules that the market should follow to make it interesting is that somebody else also wants to fill that in, for example, the north of England. Now, if the other industries expand too quickly, then yeah, you will still sell coal for a lot, right? But the demand should be something the AI wants to fill as well, be it Great Britain, be it somebody else in the British market. We're now making a profit, right? That said, nobody is obscenely wealthy. Capitalists are certainly profiting, but the wealth gap is much lower than I saw, for example, in my PayPal game. We have affluent capitalists at 36. How's the arms industry going? It's doing alright. The price of artillery isn't as high as it was when I built it, but it's still profitable and contributing to my GDP. That's what I'm talking about. This thing is what I'm talking about. I want the market to sort of stabilize because the AI reacts. Obviously, I don't want any modifiers. No, I want the AI to build their own arms industries. I want the AI to do their own stuff. Although it would be interesting if the AI could also be hostile towards you in the same market. You know, a different Canadian puppet, for example, undercuts you, that sort of stuff. But I think that might be a bit too advanced. The market is the market is the market. The market's interplay is really where that is, right? Now, how do you want the Oregon Territory, British Columbia situation to develop? I'm fine with the USA getting Oregon, so long as British Columbia remains Canadian. We actually managed to pass the poor laws. Nice, that was way faster than anything in the PayPal Let's Play. Since opposing IGs are still pretty strong, there's not much we can do without massive opposition. One law that nobody objects to is private health insurance. We'll eventually want public health insurance, but this will at least allow us to expand the institution. With all these institutions, I'm eventually going to need to expand the bureaucracy. With a growing population and already quite a few institutions to fund, I'm only just above 0 right now. Right, so he doesn't have any overflow in that capacity. I have started building a government administration. I can really see the impact of the investment fund on the national budget. Building coal mines is much cheaper because capitalists are very eager to invest. So he is able to build coal mines with it, but government administration, since they don't turn a profit, he needs to build with his own money, making it so that that's expensive for the budget, no doubt. Is it possible to see who is buying our coal? We're just throwing it into the British market. There's a map mode to see which states in the market are consuming coal, but not going to show you that. I can tell you that it's mostly the north of England. That was the hugely industrialized part, which of course also still is very much the identity and the reality in the north of England. When I think, for example, of beautiful towns of Sunderland, Scunthorpe, let's pray for them that they win in football, and let's pray for them that they maybe get a bit of industry back. I can tell you that it's mostly the north of England, and Ontario is actually the largest producer of coal in the market because he really laser focused in on it. Does the map mode show which industries are buying the coal? There's a state-by-state breakdown, which basically is per industry, because you can click on the state and then you will see what industry is in that state. Yorkshire is the single biggest consumer. Is the consumption in Yorkshire because of the production methods, or what is it? They are making motors. We just had an election, won't talk details, and the industrialists came out on top. Their leader, Charles Beckwith, is now the governor of the colony. God bless. I did see people say governors weren't elected. Governors are sent in by the crown. And this is correct. I also saw somebody, and I think this is basically the explanation, so I'm just going to repeat that. Governor appears to just be a flavor text. This is just the generic term, or well, the generic process of saying you have a parliament, you have election, and you have a leader of your government. In this case, the governor, of course, is not actually the case. It would be the prime minister, the first minister, right, if I'm not mistaken here. And the governor is then sent as sort of like the president, if you will, as the head of state, to govern instead of the actual monarch. So yeah, it's just weird terminology, but I don't think it really matters. GDP has now tripled since game start. What year is it? 1839. Again, tripling the number 1 to 3 sounds impressive in percentages, but not in absolute numbers. I'm going to abandon my quest for nationalism for a while to research water tube boiler. It'll unlock condensing engine pump for my coal mines. Returning to expansion of coal mines, taking a short break from that allowed cash reserves to build up, making construction costs even cheaper. Very nice. Capitalists are getting richer. So up here, we were at 36. And then in a year or so, 47.9. They are making bank, which is great. Like, hugely important. The industrialists are now able to have much more power thanks to the capitalist wealth increase there. And we see the result right here as well. The industrialists have 45% of total political clout. They rule practically unopposed, though they share the government with the intelligentsia. Need to work out a way to make them more powerful. 45%. I think this huge shift in a one province minor is completely adequate. If you focus the way that he has done it, in a one province minor, this makes sense. In a country like Russia and Prussia, this wouldn't be happening, because just building up a single state to be hyper-focused in one industry making a lot of money doesn't change the political cloud that much, right? If I build the coal barons up in Prussian Rhineland, right, we're looking at a situation where they don't change the entire shift. Maybe, the industrialists would go up by like 5% maybe. So I think this actually is completely fine. It means you can have radical shifts in the makeup of smaller countries, and larger countries need a lot more to actually do it. This is the exact gameplay loop and the connection of these mechanics that I personally was hoping for. It's just really funny to see it in this extreme case here, where you're a one province mine and all of a sudden they go from nowhere to this 45%. That is quite massive. Yeah, art academies are a good investment. Art will not be useful to us in this playthrough. We don't really care about prestige at all. We've almost built as many coal mines as we can. Next industry to focus on might be logging. Price of wood is fairly high. Won't be anywhere near as good as coal though. As a British subject, do you inherit all their tax? No, but Britain being ahead helps my tax spread. I assume since they share a market, there may be an increase in exposure. Listen, we don't know the math behind it. Who knows? How is the US-Mexico war going? The US won. USA and Mexico, okay. I started building my first logging camp. The era of Canadian lumberjacks begins. The plaid shirts have entered Canada. Our population is rising nicely at 488k, starting at 450k. We're one of the most attractive states in the British market. High wages, high standard of living, and the decree of the migration decree, there you go, I had to think about that, will do this. And the British market is large, making it so that many people can migrate there. Now, if the British market, or at least some of its states, were struggling, it could be even better, but hey, right now they seem to be doing well. Our logging camps are at level 1. They're using sawmills, which means we can use private ownership, employing yet more capitalists. Even though it's slightly less profitable, I'm producing hardwood as well as regular wood, as this increases employment of machinists over laborers. We have no universities, so tech spread is a hugely more powerful force than directed research. £2 million GDP. Number go up. There you have it. And why employing machinists more beneficial even if it is less profitable? Okay, difficult to read. Machinists will support IGs I like. Laborers tend to not be very politically engaged because, yeah, you know, they don't have as much an income as the machinists. And if you have higher income, you have higher education. If you have higher education, you will be politically active. At least you will be more likely to be politically active. We're actually making so much money that I will reduce taxes, which will then increase the pool, the standard of living, making him even more attractive. I mean, this is how you want to play this, right? Low taxes, making it so that people are more likely to move there because the general standard of living is higher. This is what you want. What IG do machinists support? Trade unions, usually. Eventually, we'll need them to support some of the social democratic laws we want. Right, so he wants to move, of course, away even from the industrialists and the intelligentsia, you know, and go towards the trade unions because he wanted this extremely multicultural, this extremely, basically, worker-led country. Maybe we're even going to see a communist Canada. Eventually, we'll need them to support some of the social democratic laws we want. Right, low taxes have a variety of effects. Obviously, it means that people have more money, so standard of living will increase, but it also increases my legitimacy, allowing me to pass laws faster. It also reduces the number of radicals. Now, the legitimacy increase here, I assume, is because they are bothering the people less, making it easier for the people to just accept that a government exists. The more overreach, or rather the more authority you are employing or applying, the more do you need to justify who you are, making legitimacy harder to come by. That's how I interpret that, right? After this next logging camp, I'll build a university. We can afford it. A bit early for it to kick off, but is the Great Famine modeled in game at all? Famines would certainly create migration push, but nothing I can do to artificially create one from Ontario. We talked about this when we had the naval supply network in that Dev AAR, and it's been a while, but I am very concerned that things like the Irish famine, for example, may never happen because they will always have the average prices as the entire market, because connecting London, the market capital, to Ireland is so easy. You can't really fail it, right? You just need enough transports and then there you go. I don't know whether they found a solution for this yet, whether you can have isolated overseas locations cut off from the market based on this sort of stuff, but I don't see it happening very often because it's such a vital step, right? Unless you're at war. So while I definitely welcome it, that it can happen, you know, on a very dynamic basis, I currently really doubt that the gameplay system as they exist actually will make it so. Obviously, he can't make it so. He's in Ontario, but I don't see it long term. I just don't see this being a thing of a market unless you deliberately, for some reason, destroy the port in Ireland, you know, or destroy the port in Canada. And now they no longer have access because there's nothing that you can actually go to supply it. And doing that seems really stupid. Like, I don't see why you would ever want to do that. Yeah, listen, that is one of the things where I'm definitely like, dynamic content delivery is excellent, please keep doing it, but will this ever happen? I don't know. Oh dear, the Anglican Church and the petite bourgeoisie have started a movement to enact outlawed dissent. I do not want this. They're radical enough that revolution is possible, but not enough that I think things will actually escalate that far. After passing private health insurance, I think it might be time to separate church and state. Won't that make the church wanting even more to outlaw dissent? Yes, it will make them very angry for a while, but then it will make them very weak. And organized sports. He keeps mentioning organized sports whenever he gets it. He said it in the paper AAR as well. I wonder why. What the hell does it do? Anyway, back to the logging camps. We've got 2 levels of university. Enough for now, I guess. The event for founding your first uni no longer gives you omnipotent philosopher kings. Sad. To be somebody that would have played this philosopher king patch, huh? Oh, we actually don't know how to separate church and state. We have not researched empiricism. Now, this sounds super counterintuitive. Why wouldn't you know it? But the reality is you need to gate it somewhere. Social progress needs to be behind something. And social tech is something that makes a lot of sense, that lets you adopt ideas, at least from a gameplay point of view. This is going to be unpopular and people will be radicalized, but I need to break the power of the church somehow. I am enacting public schools. Actually, no, that is insane. It will definitely cause a revolution. Interesting stuff. Private schools turn out to be just as dangerous and have to attack the church less directly. We're going with census suffrage. Expanding the voting franchise will de facto weaken the church. Makes a lot of sense, and the church doesn't feel it very directly. Having an actual institution that they are very, very strongly against is not as bad as having, a voting system that they are slightly less against. You should go with church schools. I hear Canadian church schools are very good. Nice reference. We have those, but I'd much rather have public schools. We now have the condensing engine pump PM, so production method, in our coal mines. This makes us the #1 coal producer in the world. That's crazy, right? Isn't that crazy? One province miner with only 11 slots, but I gotta tell you, he hyper-focuses on it, and once the market stabilizes, we will see that it's no longer worth it. We're gonna see that, I promise you. I don't think we're gonna see it in this episode, but we're gonna see it. Or rather, our coal mine in Ontario is the single most productive mine in the world. Even the average laborer working in the mines enjoys a high standard of living. Love that. In fact, we have one of the highest standards of living in the world. This is really nice. 15. Middling. Very good. Attraction for migration. More openness to different laws, right? That sort of stuff. A different power shift. Who has the power, who has the energy. Also meaning that you will want, if you want to stay in a conservative situation, you want to keep these industrialists, for example, or these trade unions very small, meaning that you don't actually want the laborers to earn a lot of money. That's the funny part. You might want to act against your population's best interests sometimes. But in this case, hey, we want to be liberal, so this is what you do. I'm continuing to expand my logging camps. I'll probably max them out before doing anything else. It is currently the year 1841. Damn, so much stuff in only 7 years. GDP shot up to 3.3 million. Oh, I forgot that there were radicals in my government. They've decided that we need census suffrage now, regardless of the legal process. This will upset the industrialists for a while, but we get an instant law change. Damn, so they just pushed it through. I think it's worthwhile. If he takes this choice, Upper Canada enables law census suffrage in distribution of power. Industrialist gets radical constitution for 2 years, minus 5.0 interest group approval, which is quite significant. I believe it's a scale from +10 to -10, right? So this is quite significant. This seems low. I'll make a note to up that to 5 years. I think that's a good idea. This does mean that the industrialists are no longer funding our investment pool as much, but we build up huge gold reserves and they are still contributing plenty. Can this not vary by how popular it is? They're unlikely to be bitter about nonsense and more bitter about other stuff. They really didn't like this law. So we can see that the actual approval negative that you get depends, right, on how much they disliked or liked a law. Very interesting and very positive. That is just a good sort of a way to structure this, right? I was expecting this law to take a lot longer. Not sure what to do next. Let's try private schools again. This is dangerous, but it might just work. Will our coal miners be able to afford to send their kids to private schools? Well, most definitely. Even the poorest coal miners are quite wealthy. These are the poorest coal miners in all of Ontario. They are middling. The poorest coal miners have a wealth of 16. Private schools here is huge because it will make them more educated, will make it so that you can automate your factories, your coal mines much more easily because you have a population that actually has that education level, and it makes it so that you are prepared for the future of coal mining if the price stays that high. I'm still not happy with census being the name of the literacy, so this is basically based on literacy, right? It still entails a lot of voting power from wealth as well as literacy. It's a bit of both. Good to know. Haha, resource boom. Mines and logging camps are even more productive. This is a great time to be Canadian. What are your immediate goals in the path for Canadian unification? With our insane GDP, unification should be trivial. Yet again, GDP plays a huge role to not having to do any diplomatic plays. Interesting. What I mean is, do you still have to research a tech or wait for something? Yes, we need nationalism. Currently, I can only build 2 more logging camps. Might expand universities up to my innovation cap after that. Looking into it, I don't think I have the money to get up to my innovation cap. We're rich, but not that rich. Low taxes are keeping the country very stable, and standard of living is very high. £4 million GDP. Is the growth not unrealistic? I don't think so. We've invested heavily in coal and logging, both extremely profitable industries. Maybe you could argue that the growth is not unrealistic, but that the market should have reacted already. If coal is that in demand, the AI should have built more coal mines as well, right? Should have focused down coal tech, that sort of stuff. I think that may be something that needs adjustment, but exploiting market production holes is basically the game. So in a sense, it makes sense. Opulent, 62. First of all, insanely wealthy, insanely wealthy. Second of all, yeah, they don't look that good. I will refrain from judging the 3D. Most of the 3D that we've seen, I really like. This one is really not good. They look like they're out in the rain. You can see like texture glitches right here. They look very sad. They just don't look very good. Yeah, but that's texture work. There are many steps that go into this, you know, where you have to go into it. And CK3 looks great. So frankly, I'm waiting it out, but yeah, this isn't beautiful. We just got minor power status due to the size of our economy. Alright, I totally forgot to expand my healthcare institution. We can actually max it out over time. Private healthcare reduces mortality based on pop wealth, and since everyone is rich, this might actually be very effective. How many people live in Canada now? Any significant ethnic or religious minorities? There are 13,000 Irish. Somewhere around 10% of the population is Catholic. The Irish would of course migrate, because think about it, they don't have the same rights in the Great British immediate empire compared to Canada. And Canada is also very rich. The Irish migrating here makes so much sense. Very, very happy to see that it works exactly the way that I was hoping for. We just discovered empiricism, giving us the ability to separate church and state eventually. We just switched to private schools. Private schools increase literacy based on wealth, and again, everybody's rich. Every level of investment also increases the power of the intelligentsia, which is very much in my interests. Public schools are the goal, but this is really good in the meantime. Here we go. We are enacting total separation of the state and the church. The church has already been significantly weakened by the loss of their education system. This will be the killing blow. We just got nationalism. Once again, I'm not going to elaborate on how Canadian Confederation works, but I'm about to begin the process. We have annexed Upper Canada, Quebec. You think there's like a specific interface? Man, I would love something, and this, I don't think this is in. Okay, I don't think this is in. Because if it was in, you could apply this as well to international, you know, intranational societies and organizations like the German Confederation, British empires, and so on. But imagine something like the Stellaris Senate, where you basically have votes to pass certain things, where you can have petitions, and then certain people can react to the petitions, that sort of stuff. I would really like that. You could even have like an overload approval thing in there, but I don't think that's in. I wouldn't expect, I'll just say it, I wouldn't expect too much from how this process works, but maybe I'm completely wrong. But yeah, the fact that the German Confederation as a whole doesn't exist doesn't give me a lot of confidence in that. Quebec has been annexed. This has drastically increased the government's expenses, and on average, standard of living is now lower. We need to work on getting this state up to Ontarian standards. I've restored the tax rate to normal levels for now to counter the budget, negative there. What natural resources are there in Quebec? Fair amount of iron, which could be very profitable, some wood, very little fish and whales, extremely little arable land. Price of iron is quite low at the moment. I guess we're logging in Quebec. Oh, you know what I actually do want to point out, and we're so deep in here, we're almost done with this episode, but people did point out that Toronto and Ontario do not have coal. And that seems like a really good point. That seems like an excellent point. Still, very cool to see a certain industry focused on and then developed, right? But yeah, I mean, I do think ultimately the map, what is available on it, population distribution, all that stuff will be adjusted like crazy as they go long after release. You know, we have to be aware of this. Right, where were we? Price of iron is quite low at the moment. I guess we're logging in Quebec. Ontario is running out of clear ways to build profitable industry. I'm going to start focusing on research on applications for sulfur. Are the French Canadians discriminated against? No. What about the price of steel? Price of steel matches the global average, not much profit in it. I'm expanding my sulfur mines in preparation. Quebec did bring us a new university at least. 1 million people now live in Upper Canada. Is Quebec being useful for Canada? That's new. Ah, you Canadians, stop it. It has made the country on average worse by most metrics, but we are at least bigger and our potential is greater. You know, I'll lower taxes a little. Not minimum, but less than average. Remember, taxes, you have a general law, but the actual intensity of it you can do via, basically unilateral decisions. You don't need to pass a law or anything like that. I'm also keeping government wages at maximum. How do you think that happened? Well, they got over their hatred of democracy a bit, right? That question was related to the industrialists and the landowners no longer being mad, right? Ah, Quebec is unincorporated. Better fix that. I need more bureaucracy. About half the population is Franco-Canadian now, and more Catholic. About 40% of people are Catholic. Country is basically split between Anglo-Canadian Protestants and Franco-Canadian Catholics. Another election. The radicals won decisively. Intelligentsia are the strongest IG. Even the industrialists, once 50% of total political power, remember, 45% is when we last checked on them, are now only at 20%. Damn. The radicals won decisively, intelligentsia are the strongest IG, and now we have intelligentsia and industrialists at a huge government advantage yet again. We have incorporated Quebec now after the election. Good thing they only got incorporated after the election. They probably would have voted for people I don't like, you know, the landowners and everybody that was mad, the church, for example. What year is it? 1843. When are the natives gonna have rights? Later. We don't actually know what egalitarianism is yet. I don't really like any of my construction options in Ontario right now. I'll just wait until I can build chemical plants. Anglo-Canadians have about 70% of the political power, yet only make up about 40% of the population. How do they do it? Well, I mean, they do it because they have all the money. Their standard of living is crazy. And this is a society that if you built this differently, if you had a different economy, if you didn't have infinite coal mines, you would have a completely different makeup. You couldn't switch this radically to something else. You need to have your industry go in a very particular way for this playthrough to work. And again, that is how it should be. The industry, your economic development, your market development, all of that impacting who your country is exactly how it ought to be. You could not have this in any other grand strategy game. I have started using philosophy departments in my universities, generating a lot more innovation now, though still only about half my cap. 66.6% literacy. Nice. We can now build chemical plants, so I will. Next up, nitroglycerin. We're gonna make dynamite. That is, of course, more efficient for the mines. More people will die, but you will get more out of them. Initially, our chemical plants will only be able to make fertilizer, which isn't really worth much, but dynamite should come soon. We actually can produce a small amount of explosives right away. Interestingly, we don't really have the tech to become any more progressive than we already are. I think I'll abolish the police. We really don't need them. See, these two things. It sounds very disconnected, but basically, the way I understand this is, he can abolish the police because he is looking at a situation where the radicals are in his government and therefore will not rebel. And the police, as I understand it, is primarily there to get rid of turmoil. Should he be at any given point in history in a position where he can completely abolish the police? Probably not. Like, the judicial system needs enforcers, basically, right? This is just a theory behind the judicial system. I want to make that clear as well. I'm not inviting any other debates because this is a video game. But what I mean is that the state apparatus, unless you are an anarchistic commune, relies on a police network. It's just gameplay, I guess, is the excuse that we can use here. But having police ever fully abolished is not very realistic. Even in a very decentralized situation, like in the expansion to the west in the United States of America, you had police in the sense that you had very few sheriffs all around, and then you had private bounty hunters, right? That sort of stuff. And that is not a centralized, but it is a decentralized police network that still exists. So yeah, maybe a bit over the top, but again, it's just a gameplay mechanic. It's just an institution. It's not literally abolishing police. It's just making them so minuscule that they barely play a role. There's no crime in Canada. You know how it is. Just like our laws, it's also really hard to find any way to meaningfully improve the Ontarian economy. That said, as my chemical plants are getting more productive, more parts of the British market are using its products, increasing demand. How many people are still on subsistence farming? People have totally abandoned subsistence farming in Ontario. Still some stragglers in Quebec. 6 weeks until we can start using explosives in the mines. I expect this will revitalize the coal industry again. So they're in a bit of a slump, and we're gonna see this. This is a theme here. The coal mines are nowhere near as profitable as they once were, which is really bad. Well, for everything related to, you know, his standard of living, migration attraction, budget, and that's good. Yet this huge boom, and it could potentially be a bust, and we're gonna see that as we progress through the AAR. Other parts of the market have started to catch up in productivity, and there's more supply to meet demand. We're in an early boom, but things are stabilizing. I think I'll stop this session soon. In a few months, I'll be able to unify with other Canadian colonies. That seems like a good endpoint, and we're done for today. Queen Victoria of Hanover has signed into law the confederation between Upper Canada and the Hudson Bay Company. This marks a great victory in our goal of unifying all of Canada. Nice. It took the AI, let me check this, on the British market, which is huge. Which year were we in here? 1843, I think, right? I can't find it again. But it took the AI about, let's say, it took him 2 years to get this monopoly on coal. So we're talking 1838. It took them like 5 years to bring the market of coal into rough equilibrium. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. 5 years of boom, huge standard of living increase, migration attraction, and now the threat of a ghost town. because the potential, the budget, the standard of living can't be maintained unless he finds a new sector to exploit, a new sector that he can jump into. That's what the core gameplay and the societal development of Victoria 3 should be about. This is my favorite AAR so far, because it does exactly what I was hoping for Victoria 3 would be doing. Let me know what you think, but let's just take his last comments here, right, after this first play session. Keeping an eye, first of all, no maps. Yeah, I'm also very angry. Keeping an eye on the British market and adjusting for fluctuations to keep my industries profitable was the hardest thing in this playthrough so far. I guess if I had to set new Canadian goals after I'm done, I might be going communist or something. Trade unions are getting stronger. And right here's a really interesting explanation as well. Sometimes it's definitely beneficial to produce more than you need. If you have other industries that use those materials and which are more important to you, then it might be worth sacrificing the profitability of your raw materials industries. But if you're not personally profiting from manufactured goods, for example, Ontario wasn't doing much with coal itself, then that's not worthwhile. Makes a lot of sense, right? So the price of coal going lower is good for so many other people in the market, but it's bad for him. Exciting. Let me know what you think. I thought that this was a really good showcase so far about building up an economy and the societal shift that comes with it, which is such a core tenet of Victoria 3. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you later, alligator.